think we are, right?
Yes.
All right. Welcome back to another CryptoVagabonds Q&A. Today I have a pretty long presentation when compared to other presentations because there's a lot of things happening since we last spoke. And because it's a longer presentation, I'm going to start right away. So without any further ado, let me get straight to the presentation so we can start a discussion after that. So let me know when you can see my screen. And
I can see the screen.
Okay, right. So I'm going to zoom out of the way. Just a second. Okay, here we go. All right, just remember, whatever we produce in any platform, all of our content, none of our content is to be seen as financial ties or legal device. All of our content is here for just informational and educational purpose only. Doesn't matter where you see our content, we are not providing financial advice. Once you agree with that, you are welcome to see and consume and listen to our content. So this Q&A does occur every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We may be changing the time because I think for the American public it's not the right time. We are considering changing this to a more friendly hour to the American public. And of course, you can always interact with us in Clubhouse, YouTube, Instagram, and X. And today we're going to be talking about why Russia is winning the war. And I know that's not a narrative that most people hear, but we're going to be using data. We're going to be using numbers to express why we believe Russia is winning and the West and Ukraine are losing. So the roadmap for the presentation of today is going to be the following. We're going to be looking at recent events. We're going to explain mathematically on graphs why we believe Russia should be winning. We're going to be also talking about a little bit of hypocrisy or lack of transparency that is happening in Europe. And then I'm going to be giving my final thoughts. Also, we're going to be updating you on the recent occurrence on the war. So the recent events. So I thought these will be recent. We have more recent than this. But what happened is Donald Trump got elected. And I think Zelensky started to realize that once Trump takes office, he may not be able to receive the same amount of support that he's receiving from the US now. And that also means possible diminishing of support that's receiving from Europe, because if the US pulls themselves out of supporting Ukraine, Europe is going to follow. So I think Zelensky and Biden start to see the gravity of the situation. And then Biden authorized Zelensky to use long-range missiles on Russian territory. Now, I want to put a little bit brackets here and explain what does that mean, right? It means that the American equipment that launches missiles must be operated by NATO soldiers, but in this case, American soldiers, because giving authorization for the long-range missiles to be used is not the same thing as handling a weapon to somebody else. If I have a pistol and I give it to someone else can just pull the trigger and use that pistol without me. Long-range missiles need to be synchronized and communicate with specific satellites that are run by the US. That setting up of the communication between the missile and the satellite has to be done with proper passwords and training that an American soldier will have to be operating. So that means American infrastructure, weapons, missiles on Ukrainian soil operated by American satellites, American soldiers shooting the largest supernuclear power on the planet. So that was one event. Things got worse after that. So of course, once that happens, Vladimir Putin felt the need to give a response. And he gave a response by launching a missile. Now, not just any missile, it's a ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. Let me explain to you guys what does that mean. That is a missile that goes straight to a certain altitude where it's no longer being able to be picked up by radars. Radars operate with sound, and sound needs matter in order to exist. There's no sound without matter. That's why there's no sound in the vacuum. So when the atmosphere becomes too thin, radars are no longer able to pick it up. That missile then is going to go on its trajectory where it's supposed to fall, and then it's going to fall vertically on whatever target it is. Now, that falling vertically also means it's difficult to be picked up by radar. Radar operates with horizontal sound waves, not vertical. So then it falls. Now, it's pretty much a rocket going to that altitude, going to its target and falling on the target. Now, in this case, it's the first time that an ICBM has been used against another country. There's a whole infrastructure of satellites to pick up this kind of activity. And this is specifically created to deliver nuclear explosives. Now, this one in particular was just an empty shell without any explosives. Now, here we have an example of what it looks like. It's a rocket, like a rocket going to the moon. And many countries test these missiles, but whenever they're going to test it, they need to communicate to other enemies, because when a satellite picks up the launching of this missile, is a whole infrastructure of security that needs to be taken in place. And that infrastructure involves getting the nuclear superpowers on alert, the US, and then the president of the US has to make a decision whether to retaliate or not. That decision normally must be taken within 10 minutes before the missile reaches destination. Now, it has been used by North Korea, has been used by Russia, that have always been used for tests, but not to attack another country. Now, as I mentioned, this was just an empty shell, okay? Now, because Biden did not say, Russia communicated this to us, we are aware of this, no problem. I think the Biden administration did not know how to respond to the response of Vladimir Putin, and they decided to say, we don't know anything about it. By saying they do not know anything about it, I think here Putin helped the Democratic Party, and he said, listen, it was not a long-range missile, was an intermediate-range ballistic missile. Pretty much Vladimir Putin created, this whole incident created a new category of missiles. Regardless of the range, the signal was picked up, and if the signal was not picked up, NATO countries have problem, which means if the satellite does not detect that going up, there's a problem. But the biggest issue now is that countries are asking themselves, can we trust the US? Because the president denied knowing about the launching of an intercontinental ballistic missile. This is not a small thing on the geopolitical world. So here we have launching ICBMs or risk the retaliation of your opponent. And that retaliation means nuclear, because remember, these missiles are created with the sole purpose of delivering atomic bombs, nuclear bombs to other countries. So whenever any country is going to launch this, they need to communicate clearly to the enemy that they are testing, so there's no retaliation. Now, as I mentioned to you guys, the US denies knowing about this, and then Vladimir Putin kind of helped the US, saying it was not intercontinental, it was intermediate range missile. Now, the questions now that they were asking is, did the satellite pick up the signal? Was Biden notified of this? And the answer to those questions are, no country on earth would launch this without communicating to their enemies. So yes, Biden administration, the US, they were aware of this launching of this missile. If they were not, it's still, they knew about it because of the satellite picking that signal up. So Vladimir Putin pretty much saved the Biden administration, creating a new category of missile. But this is not a small thing. The trust of other nations and other countries on the system is being shaken. Their trust on the American authorities has been shaken. So there's a lot of theories. Some say that they detect the missile, they saw it, and did not see an immediate threat. That cannot be possible, not with the level of infrastructure that has been put in place to pick up this kind of activity. So, but still there's a question. Did the satellites not pick it up? Can we trust the US? Can we trust the systems? Can we trust the deterrence for mutual assured destruction? The whole thing now is into question. Now, without the official confirmation, it's unclear whether if they fully understood the situation at the time or simply relied on Russia later explanation. And I think is they knew, but the story that the media is telling is they did not know. I don't see Vladimir Putin taking his chances, launching a missile, not informing anyone about it, risk retaliation, which means nuclear weapons being sent to destroy Russia, annihilate Russia. I don't see him taking that risk, but I guess we're never gonna find out. The thing is, regardless of what happened, we are now a little bit closer to the possible World War III and a nuclear war. And I remember when I started talking about this, as soon as the invasion occurred, I remember talking about this and people say I was making this up. I was talking about the possible World War III when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan. I thought that was a mistake. I specifically say this in Clubhouse for years. It's a mistake. We're going to take the world from a peaceful time into wartime, and we may have World War III, and here we are. So to me, Russia had no intention of using nuclear weapons in Ukraine. They launched this missile to send a signal. We are the largest superpower in the world in terms of nuclear weapons. Do not mess with us. We have the missiles, and we're going to use it, because Biden crossed a line when he sent American soldier with American weapons to shoot areas of Russia which are not Kursk, the area which Ukraine already took. So now what's going to happen? There's a need for retaliation, right? And the retaliation is going to be that Ukraine, that's another recent event, Ukraine wants to have nuclear weapons. And if you want to find out more about this, we made a video on the channel talking specifically about the geopolitical world of nuclear weapons. Ukraine, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine was the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons. They gave that back to Russia with the request of UK, US, and France, if I'm not mistaken. And the deal was that those three countries would come to help Ukraine if Russia ever became aggressive to Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is not satisfied with the help that they're getting. They know that Trump is not going to give the support that Biden is giving. So now they want to get nuclear weapons. And Biden say that that's possible. That is the new chain of events. Biden is willing to give nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Now, I'm going to be making a video about Zelensky. What does it mean for Zelensky to have nuclear weapons, and how did he got into power? So please, if you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, because it's going to be notified when that video comes up. I have a surprise for you on Zelensky. Now, Ukraine does not qualify to be part of NATO. We already know this. Donald Trump says that he's not going to give support to Ukraine, but Ukraine wants to restore their nuclear capability in order to boost their sovereignty and their independence. So we're going to be making more videos explaining to you guys what the consequence of that's going to be. I don't see, unless Biden gives those weapons to Ukraine before Trump takes power, I don't see the rest of the planet agreeing to Zelensky having nuclear weapons. So regardless, they want to have it. Now, someone told me this morning that Ukrainian population wants to have nuclear weapons. And I think the reason why people ask that question is because they know the vast majority of the population do not understand what does it mean to have nuclear weapons and what does it mean to use nuclear weapons. The only time that nuclear weapons were used against another nation was the US using those weapons against Japan, and that ended the war. They explode one bomb, and then Japan says, they maybe have only one. They explode the second one, they say, okay, they have more than one, we need to go back. It's important to understand that when that happened, only one country on the planet had nuclear bombs, and there was no chance of retaliation. In today's world, because I explained to you guys about the systems that are in place, the moment Zelensky pulls the trigger of a nuclear weapon against Russia before that missile lands in Russia, Russia holds the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet. Vladimir Putin is going to have no hesitation, no doubt to say counterattack. That means by the time the missile lands on Russia, there's going to be hundreds of missiles coming to Ukraine. That's the total annihilation of Ukraine just by pulling the trigger. A nuclear weapon is not a weapon that you want to use. And I think the question was asked wrongly. First, you need to explain to the population, what does it mean to pull the trigger to send a missile, a nuclear weapon against another country that has nuclear power? And it's not just has nuclear power, it has the largest arsenal of missiles, nuclear missiles on the planet. They have missiles flying on the air, they have missiles on submarines, and they have missiles on hidden bunkers across the globe outside the territory. That means when the missile goes to Russia, the security system picks that up, Vladimir Putin shoots back. There's going to be hundreds of nuclear missiles coming to different points in Ukraine, and there's the total annihilation of Ukraine. I doubt that doesn't matter how many missiles is given to Zelensky. He doesn't have enough missiles to eradicate Russia. Russia is the largest territory on the planet in terms of countries. Now, Ukraine is very small. Vladimir Putin has the power to, with one phone call before he dies, to annihilate Ukraine forever. So that's what it means to give. And I don't see Zelensky not using those weapons. So, sorry for the typo, that's Biden's. So the New York Times talk about Biden agreeing to send nuclear weapons to Ukraine. And to me, that's just a further escalation to the war. Now, again, they gave access to Ukraine to long-range missiles. Russia respond with interballistic missiles. The Kremlin already say they will have a response. So, and Russia is already prepared for the escalation. Russia is preparing themselves to counterattack Ukraine. Now remember, it's the largest nuclear superpower on the planet that's preparing. So that is the recent events. Let's talk about what this conflict has done to Russia and why we believe Russia is winning. We're going to be looking at economic numbers, like the numbers of the economy. So no war economy is sustainable for long periods. We all agree with that. However, after 2.5 years, over 1,000 days of this war, Russia has been showing surprise and unexpected economic resilience. The sanctions have not worked and they have not caused damage to Russia. So blocking Russia from banks and the SWIFT system, freezing their reserves, did not cause much damage. One positive thing, it helped us with the crypto space. Those countries are using cryptocurrencies. We're going to be talking about that in a few more slides. But look at this, gold reserves. You can see that from 2009, it started to increase. 2014, the made nothing happen, increased more. So that tells me that Vladimir Putin is preparing for a very long time. Look at the amount of gold that they're accumulating. So they have great gold reserves, and they have not sold their reserves of gold to sustain this war. To the contrary, the gold reserves have increased, okay? Now, I already mentioned to you guys, they are also using Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies for transactions. So thank you, US, for imposing sanctions in Russia. They are using cryptocurrencies to make the transactions. They are restarting to realize that the SWIFT system is controllable, is possible to be manipulated. Cryptocurrencies are not. So the citizens and companies in Russia are circumnavigating those sanctions imposed by the SWIFT system and by US. They're going to cryptocurrencies. So that's good news for crypto. And we can see here, even the West recognizes this, a significant increase in interest in cryptocurrencies after the start of the conflict. Reuters wrote about it, and you can see it's not just interest in crypto that increased. Russia GDP annual growth has also increased. You can see here, after the war, Russia annual GDP grows around 4%, with the IMF projecting over 3% growth for 2024. Yes, inflation is at 8.6%, but you need to understand, this level of inflation for Russian population is low inflation. They used to be in a communist world, USSR. This is paradise to them. Inflation at 8% is very manageable for the population. It is not manageable for American population. It's not manageable for the European population. But for Russia, this is peanuts for the population. I can see here, the exchange rate, yes, it got hurt in the beginning, but it's correct. And now the ruble has greater value in relation to the dollar than it had before the conflict. So it depreciated after the war began, but they managed to stabilize. The ruble, again, has higher value now than what it had before the war began in relation to the US dollar. And how they do that? They're willing to increase interest rates. Again, 19% of interest rates is high on the perspective of America, but it's not high from the perspective of Russia. So they're doing well. Here, the US has deficit. Guess what? Russia does not have deficit. So they have stabilized and they are now on surplus. You can see September 2024. So they have a surplus instead of a deficit. So economically speaking, they're even better than the US. Now, how is their exports? The exports remain at substantial levels comparable to 2018, 2021. And you can see here. And by the way, all this data is not provided by Russia. This data is available to you guys, provided by the West. So you can see here, 2022, yes, it declined, but it still continue stable and up. And again, they are not on deficit, okay? So China significantly increased their trade with Russia. Brazil had increased the imports from Russia. So Europe does not want products from Russia, no problem. They go to China, they go to India, they go to Brazil, they go to other countries. They continue being able to export their goods. You can see here, Brazil increased their imports from Russia in 2023, exceeding 11 billion. Primarily, diesel, oil, 6.3 billion, and fertilizers. Remember, fertilizers are made with petrol. Russia has a lot of it. India imports surged to 67 billion in 2023 from 8.7 billion in 2021, mainly crude oil and petroleum products. You already know that. Now look at here, February 2022, December 2022. Russian oil tax revenue, they continue to export oil. We have made videos about this in the channel. Oil-related tax revenues in September 2024 were at levels comparable to 2021 and early 2022. You can see here before the invasion, it's pretty much the same level. So Russia has been able to adapt to the sanctions. They have, the Western has put a price cap on their oil, and they found creative way to do it. We already show a video specific about this on the channel, but here we have it. Russia responded by developing a new fleet of tankers to ensure the continued export of oil. So what they did, our Russian tankers cannot export and sell without the price going above the cap. They just bought a fleet of ships from another country with 25 tankers, and now it's no longer Russian ships, are in fact Greek and UK ships transporting Russian oil. Remember, that's the market. I have a product that you want to buy, no matter how much sanction is there, you're gonna buy it. So approximately 25 tankers were purchased in recent months, now forming part of the Russia shadow fleet, responsible for transporting millions of barrels of oil. This fleet transported about 123 million barrels of oil, ensuring that Russia's continue to have the revenue, which are critical for maintaining Russia's economy and continue to fund the war efforts. Now, the sanctions on oil has failed. Now, what about sanctions on products? We're going to be talking about that as well. So while sanctions have disrupted Russia's economy, they have not achieved the desired impact of halting the war effort. Now, let's look at Europe. The US is saying for Europe not to make deals with Russia, not to export to Russia. Let's see what's happening. So here we have the monthly exports to Russia, okay? And since March 2022, it declined, but start to go up, and those are the other countries, okay? China is the black one. You can see decline here, but continue to increase. Everyone else, European countries, it went down. The blue one is Germany, France. So you can see that here, it shows a decline, especially for Germany, because Germany was buying oil from Russia. But Has Russia really been hurt by this? Let's see. Exports. The European Union has increased their exports to Armenia right after the conflict began. Do you think Armenia are consuming this, or Armenia create businesses to import from Europe and export to Russia? Look at this, exactly March 2022. So the European countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, export goods to intermediate nations, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and then they export to Russia. And why they do that? Because Europe is on a crisis. Remember, they have to get energy from Europe. Energy prices are getting high. They need to sell their goods. And what Donald Trump is talking about tariffs. Guess what? Russia was a good client. They were buying from us. Let's find a way to get our products to them. And you can see here, there has been a sudden increase in export to these countries, and they all happen after March 2022, when the sanctions began. Look at this. European exports of automobile trucks to Kazakhstan, March 2022. This looks like a huge increase of exports. Look at here, 2022. Germany monthly exports of goods to Kyrgyzstan, same thing. Look at this, all the graphs here for you guys. Hungary, Bulgaria exports, Slovak export to Kyrgyzstan, Germany, Poland, even Poland being supporting Ukraine. Look at this, look at exports, business as usual. Czech Republic, Serbia, Romania export, Slovenia, Italy, Austria, Spain. The European nation will continue to sell their products. The market doesn't care about the war. They will continue selling their goods to Russia. And the fact that this increased, that means Russia are still buying the same products that they were buying before the war. They're not being hurt by the sanctions. So, conclusion, the US imposed sanctions, it didn't work. The US helped Ukraine, did not work. And another measure for me that shows that the West is losing is the way they're escalating. They're even talking about giving nuclear weapons to Zelensky. That is a sign of desperation. The world is watching. This war, Russia is ahead, and the West now has depleted their capability of ammunition. NATO has been hurt, not able to replace the ammunition that they have used for Ukraine. They're so desperate that they're now talking about giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine. 20% of the territory has been gone. 20% of the population has fled Ukraine. The price of real estate in Ukraine has collapsed. They have not been able to do re-elections, which is the least that the democracy needs to show as a functional state. The world is watching, and Russia is not being economically hurt by these sanctions in the least, as you guys could see here. So with this, I'll stop my presentation, and I just really recap to you. We talk about the two recent events, the long missile, and in the week later, talking about nuclear weapons being given to Ukraine. We show the metrics. Russia is not being hurt. The ruble is just as strong and even stronger than what it was before the conflict. The exports continue to be on an all-time high, and Europe continues to export things to Russia. So this is the hypocrisy or the two-face that European countries are showing. The market doesn't care. My conclusion, this war is not going to hurt Russia the way that the West intends to. It's only going to hurt the West. You already see the outflow of money coming from gold ETFs because they no longer trust the American authorities not to abuse their privilege. So this is it. If you want to learn more about this and be in control of your own money, consider joining the Academy. Link for that in the description below. I'm going to stop sharing now and hear your questions about this. Sorry to bring bad news to you guys. Go ahead, Notorious.
Thank you, Boop. So, do you think? Well, okay. Let me preface it. I had researched and read that America sent the long-range missiles to Ukraine back in April of this year, right? And so they didn't give the authority until November or whenever it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you believe that the actual firing of that missile really came from an American soldier per se, or is that enough time for them to have taught Ukrainians how to launch?
Okay, so I'll explain this to you differently.
Okay.
Those missiles, they use satellite systems, okay? They cannot work without a satellite system. Now, the satellite system is run by the US. The US needs to authorize, let's say, let me give it to you. A Ukrainian got perfectly trained and a Ukrainian decided to shoot this, right? And still, it cannot be shot, it cannot be used without American people approving and clicking OK on the keyboard for the communication with the satellites. You understand what I mean? Like, and it's not a GPS like our
Yes.
Google map. No, this is military grade GPS. It's not Google Earth GPS. I just want to make sure you
Okay.
understand.
Yes, that makes sense then. Okay. Thank you.
So, and that's why the Vladimir Putin is saying he's not fighting Ukraine, he's fighting the US and NATO. Because, like I say, even if there was a Ukrainian pulling the trigger, that Ukrainian has to be trained by an American. That means an American on soil. Now, I don't know if you know this. There's another news I didn't mention to you guys. Vladimir Putin, the Russian army, they capture some soldiers invading the Russian Kursk region. He captured the soldiers. They're British. They're not Ukrainians. Did you hear about that?
No, I did not hear about that.
So that tells me a lot of things. The West, Ukraine is losing. The West is losing to the point where British soldiers are coming to fight. So I'm sure it didn't make news on the West, but I saw this. Vladimir Putin's like, I got those British guys here, and now he's using them as bargaining chip, because how can the UK explain a British soldier with British weapon inside Russian soil fighting and shooting Russian soldiers? Yeah.
So what's gonna happen now after that? To me, it's a little bit strange because I feel that these news are not being spread
On the
as much
West.
yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, people are talking about propaganda from Vladimir Putin, right? And I think, like, I'm going to give an example to you. We have at least 3 Americans here. Have you guys seen anyone in American media explaining to you guys what does it mean long-range missiles in Ukraine?
Not to the level that you have, no. Can you hear me?
Ross,
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
I said not to the degree that you did.
Okay, so most people think giving long-range missiles is the same thing as giving your 9mm pistol to your neighbor to use it, right? He's just going to pull the trigger and be able to operate everything on by himself, right? That is the view that most American has, and that's the news that they're receiving. Is that correct? Notorious, Ross, Alchemist.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to get to my mute button. I have not heard the reporting of the details behind the long range missiles, right? And what it takes and what's required in order for them to fire. It's just, kind of high level information that Biden approved, Ukraine to use long range missiles in the war.
So in a way that Americans think is the same as giving a 9mm pistol, right? he can
Well,
use
if
it.
well, yeah, we don't know the details behind it unless the military people may know, but the average citizen, no, we don't understand what that means. And like I said, the details behind the logistics to fire off one.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
So
yeah, Boof, are you talking about like mainstream media, or are you talking about like
no,
industries
I'm
like?
talking about, because look, I want to just say something to you guys. The response to this act was ICBMs, right? Now, I'm not sure if the American population understand that never in the history of humanity an ICBM has been used against another country, right? Did you guys know that? It's like CNN saying, listen, we cross a global line, like putting across a line that is like never been crossed before. Is that not making the news in America? That's my question.
No, I don't believe that's making mainstream news. No. But at the same time, I wouldn't like. I don't really watch mainstream news that much, so I wouldn't know. But I would imagine just based off of assumptions, probably not. Actually, I'm pretty confident that no, probably not. So
So just for you guys to know, like, what happened, geopolitically speaking, is worse than the missile crisis. Are you guys familiar with the missile crisis? I think at least Ross and Notorious, I'm assuming you guys were alive for that, right? Maybe you were kids then. Does the American population understand what the missile crisis was?
I don't think so.
But you know
We've
you know about
heard
it,
it.
right?
Yeah, we heard there was one, but I don't think the average person understands what it was all about. No.
Okay, so the missile crisis was this. USSR, Soviet Union, had put nuclear missiles in Cuba. Okay, they made a military agreement with Cuba, not Russia, Soviet Union. Okay, and they put those missiles there, and they were camouflaging those missiles, making them look like palm trees. An airplane flying and taking pictures in a high altitude with very nice lenses, and then took those pictures to the military intelligentsia in America, and they say, whoops, wait a minute. There are nuclear missiles in Cuba, placed there by the Soviets. The whole operation was a disaster by the Soviets, but that's besides the point. When that information became public, or the US was informed of it, the entire world at the time went on alert. That was the closest we have ever been to a nuclear war. The two leaders, the political leader at the time of the US with the political leader of Soviet Union, they came within an agreement in less than a week, 6 days. That shows to me that the two leaders knew they did not want a nuclear conflict. And the deal was for the US to remove their military presence from Turkey. And Soviet Union would remove their missiles from Cuba. There were other missiles on the middle of the ocean going to Cuba. They made a U-turn and they went back to Soviet Union. What became public, because every leader has to beat their chest and hold face to their population, the American public did not know about the military base in Turkey being taken down. They only knew that strong US managed to remove nuclear missiles from Cuba back to Soviet Union. Soviet Union declared to the population, we got the military presence from Turkey close to us to be removed. To me, whenever that happened, it showed that the two leaders were conscious of what did it mean to have a nuclear conflict. None of them wanted. What is really puzzling my mind is is that sense of what does it mean to have a nuclear conflict being erased from the political leaders? That's the question that I have. It seems like the Democratic Party, at least in the US, are no longer on the same page in saying we do not want a nuclear conflict. Because if you guys don't know this, stay tuned. I'm going to make a video about Zelensky. Zelensky will pull the trigger against Vladimir Putin. For better or worse, Putin has shown sanity. He hasn't used nuclear weapons yet, not even like tactical nuclear missiles. Ukraine has used nuclear weapons against Russia. They have used bullets, which has been contaminated with nuclear radiation to Russia. But Russia has not used that yet, which shows to me a great degree of sanity from Vladimir Putin, for whatever it's worth. So that was the missile crisis, the Cuba missile crisis. And the fact that we are now 1,000 days into this conflict versus 6 days of the Cuba missile crisis, it shows me that someone has no understanding of how serious it is to have a nuclear conflict. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does make sense.
Yeah, I would say this though, like you said, Zelensky would he would do the nuke, you know, like he would use it. Were you talking about like in the future? Sure. Or are you talking about
They already did. Look,
because I don't think he would. I don't think he will if Trump tells him not to. I don't think that will happen at all.
no. If Trump tells him not to, look. One thing that I think, I could be wrong. One thing that I believe very dearly, we don't need any other country to have nuclear weapons. I don't want to live in a planet where the amount of countries with nuclear weapons start to increase. I don't want Iran to have a nuclear.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
The more countries having this, the greater our risk it becomes.
Mm-hmm. We're definitely on the same page there. Yeah, I don't think that Zelensky, like, I think Zelensky is basically dependent on, I mean, I think we both know this, like they're dependent on the Americans essentially, right? So, you know, I think that Zelensky will pipe down and do what he's told if Trump, you know, tells him something. And Trump has the guts to do that. He's already shown that, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I just hope it doesn't get, because they already use nuclear weapons, not nuclear bombs, but nuclear weapons. And I think we report this to you guys on the channel. There are bullets that gets contaminated with nuclear radiation, like the waste uranium from nuclear plants. They use that to contaminate bullets. And Zelensky has used those bullets against Russia. The problem of those bullets is if they remain contaminating the water, the trees, the soil for at least 50 years. That has already been used. So this war with Ukraine is already nuclear because Zelensky has used those bullets. So I don't think Zelensky has a limit. And I don't want to spoil, but we're making a video about Zelensky. You guys are going to be surprised on who he is, the level of corruption that is happening in Ukraine. And he already made a show called The Servant of the People, which happens to be the same name of his political party. But he had a show on television where he was the president of Ukraine. It was a comedy show. If you guys just see the scene on how he solved the problems when things became out of his reach, you have that scene there, Cora? Can you share that scene? I'm just going to show you a scene. He was the writer, the director, and the main actor on the show, where he became the president of Ukraine. And whenever things became out of his range, that he could no longer deal with them, here's how he solved it on the show. And a lot of other things that he did on the show is happening today. So go ahead, Cora. Share the screen. Zelensky as the president of Ukraine, solving problems when he felt checkmated or cornered.
Look, do we, do we agree though that basically, I mean, Zelensky does what he's told by the West, right?
No,
We
no.
agree with that.
Watch this. Just watch this.
I watched it last night.
Yeah.
Я понимаю, что многие боятся этих реформ как огня. Но уж простите, господа, придется забыть про Мальдивы и Доны Периньоны. Общество поменялось. И оно больше не будет ждать и прощать.
За один. Рішення не прийнято.
Я тоже против. Я случайно зелененькую нажал.
Надо было меньше вчера на беленькую нажимать.
А что вас веселит? Что смешного? Да людям жрать нечего! Что в Днепропетровске, что в Днепре. И с детьми страшно по улицам ходить. И неважно, какая это улица. Кирова или Коновальца. И суд в нашей стране продажный. Что в Октябрьском районе, что в Шевченковском.
А кто в этом виноват? Вы!
И вы!
Я и моя фракция! Мы
Знаем
работаем!
про вашу фракцию! Не припиніть, будь ласка!
Мы делаем все для страны.
Ты мне скажи, почему вы не голосовали за генпрокурора?
Знает весь двор мой приговор.
So
Okay, I did not watch that. That is incredible. It's incredible.
have you guys had the knowledge that he had a mini series called The Servant of the People? And that's how it ends. And that's how he solves the problem when him as a president and his wishes are not done or people don't agree with him.
I was
No,
not
this is
aware.
new to me.
Sorry, Notorious?
Oh, I was saying I was not aware of that.
Same.
Russ? How is it for you to see that now, Russ?
Quite interesting.
Notorious?
I could also see that happening in
Well-
America. Let me say that.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Roz. I was like, okay, so politics is kind of the same everywhere. I can see that happening between our, Republicans versus the Democrats and office and, all of that. So
what I want you guys to understand with this is the following. He made a miniseries where he became the president of Ukraine. And there's a few things on that miniseries that's happening, okay? And the response that he had on the miniseries is the response that he's giving in real life. I just hope it doesn't come to that point, okay? So, and another thing that I want to say to you guys, and I just want you to ask yourselves this question. Zelensky is a president of Ukraine that understands how to run a country under war, where there is a lot of exceptions open to him as a human being to do a lot of things that he wouldn't be doing in peacetime. Could him, after 1,000 days, over 1,000 days in war, being the celebrity of the world, being on the cover of Vogue, being this man that it is known to the entire planet, and having the privilege that war has provided him, not to mention the corruption money that he has been used to please his friends, could it be that he has no interest in ending this war because he's just used to the way things are? After all, he's a human being.
I mean,
By
it's
the
possible, but I think he's a puppet. Like, I don't think that. I think you're giving him like too much like power. Like, I think Zelensky's a puppet put in there by like
Okay.
certain people, and I think you understand what I'm saying. And then, like, I think at the end of the day, if somebody else that actually is not on that same trajectory sits him down and tells him what to do, such as Donald Trump, I don't think that that's a concern. I think Trump. I mean, he's already shown, like, Trump has already shown based on the past with North Korea and other conflicts, like, that he can kind of de-escalate things, peace through strength. You know, I don't think Zelensky's any different. Zelensky's not like a, you know.
Okay, I see your point, but I want to hear Ross and Notorious. Notorious, you're saying something?
Yeah, so you were asking whether or not you said Zelensky is profiting, right, from the war, right, after 1,000 days, and you don't see him ending it. So why would he go nuclear then? That's where my mind immediately went. Like, because the nuclear war would kind of end stuff after, you know.
I'm not sure he's
if they
aware of the
both went
consequences.
nuclear.
I'm not sure he's aware of the consequences of nuclear weapons. Like, I want to give an example to you. South Africa had nuclear weapons. Okay, they had the ability to have nuclear weapons. You know what they did? We don't want it. It's too dangerous for us to have this. We don't want it. That shows a huge degree of sanity. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure that Zelensky understands what it. Look, he has been a comedian and a very successful entrepreneur. I'm not sure he understands what does it mean to run a country, to be a leader of a country with nuclear weapons. Ukraine doesn't have that now. They had that on the time of the Soviet Union collapse, and they gave that back to Russia. I don't think they understand today what does that mean, Notorious. And I'm just talking about a human being, though, that we get used to things as they are. Go ahead.
I understand that. However, I do not believe that is a true statement, considering he's under advisement from NATO, from Western countries, from whatever. I'm sure someone has told him the repercussions and consequences of using nuclear. I mean, we can just look at, Pearl Harbor during that time, and the radioactivity, and, Chernobyl. I mean, I can't imagine that he does not know, right? That's where I am.
Okay, so
May
one
I
thing is
add?
to go ahead, Russ. Go ahead.
I agree with Notorious. I think it was a move. I call it a chess move, so that Putin knows what risk he faces. I think that Putin probably, again, it's kind of like a threat, because again, some people, you don't know they're crazy until you know they're crazy. So I don't think Putin knows what extent Zelensky would go to. So I do believe that the U.S. has educated him on the consequences. I cannot imagine that the U.S. would allow him to have access to that without educating him on the consequences.
Okay, so let me rephrase this. I'm not saying that he doesn't know what I'm sharing with you guys. I don't think that's the case, Russ. What I'm referring to is there's a difference between knowing. I'm going to give an example to you, right? Everybody knows that eating more and working out less is bad for them. Everybody knows that eating American food is bad for them, right? They know that. People know that smoking is bad. They know that drinking is bad. They know. Are they aware? They have a level of awareness to be able to stop and not do it.
Booth, I'm with you. People are not aware. They don't know how close they are to this thing. And even people in the group here, I don't think they realize how close we are to this horrible thing. It's
Thank
truly
you.
serious, so serious. And it's not because they don't understand it mentally, but when somebody is hell-bent, they just do whatever it takes to take them to hell. And so people are going to different paths, and their path is one that leads to no good place. And that's why they don't have awareness.
Thank you. So, there's a difference between having access to the information. I'm going to example to you. I do not trust Zelensky not to use the nuclear weapons. I do not trust him not to use it. That's my point, because he already used nuclear weapons against Russia, not explosives, but nuclear, uranium contaminated enriched bullets. He shot that into the Russian soldiers, in total disregard on how that will contaminate the water, how that will contaminate his own land, because if birds and animals cross borders, and animals don't respect political borders. So animals that got contaminated with these radioactive bullets may as well walk into Ukrainian soil and contaminate himself. So that to me shows that I cannot trust him with nuclear weapons, regardless of the education. I'm sure he's educated on the consequences of using those bullets that he used in the past and continue to use. And I think he's aware of the consequences, that what's going to happen with the water, what's going to happen with the animal life, and how his own population is going to be affected by this. He did not care. He still used those. That's what I'm using as reference. One thing is to have the information. Another thing is to fully have the awareness and not to use it. I could be the leader of any country. I could be at any conflict. I will never put, not to mention the soldiers get also contaminated by radioactive when they handle those ammunition. So he didn't care for the life of the soldiers being contaminated. He didn't care about the wife and the kids and the offspring of those soldiers who were handling radioactive material. You see what I'm saying, Ross?
I see what you're saying, but I think that could be true for any of the leaders. I don't think it was wise for Putin to even start the war in the first place. Again, we're talking about egos. And that's any of the leaders today or tomorrow would be in the same situation. And the truth is, we don't know. It's the egos that's driving it all, no matter who it is. And so I think it's not just him. And again, I'm not trying to defend, Zelensky for any particular reason. In my head, and the logic is that ego is what got us here in the first place, right? No matter whose it was. And it was the same for Putin. It was his ego. So, Putin took a risk. He didn't know knowing the risk of World War III, nuclear retaliation, whether it's US or, NATO or whatever. He was willing to take that risk still. So had Putin not, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but he did.
Okay. So I have a question for you, Ross. You are the leader of Russia. You are the political leader of Russia. The one institution that's been created to be against you is bringing nuclear weapons and taking your front door neighbor as an ally. What would you do, Ross?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be the leader of Russia, but
No, but you understand.
since you asked, kind of.
Yeah.
I know. I do understand what you're saying. It's a catch-22, to be honest. There's no easy answer or guarantee either way. You can not respond. Think about it, because when Putin started invading Ukraine, when he started that war, Ukraine didn't think it would ever happen, right? Zelensky and people did not think it would happen. And so I think it just goes to, again, leaders and their egos and just making the decision that you think is best. I understand the idea in terms of protecting, you know, your country. I do understand that. But at the same time, I mean, thinking about Russia and everybody else that has, knowing whoever is in NATO, the US and anybody else in NATO that has nuclear weapons, come on now. You know what I'm saying? So, like, is that a risk that I would, is that a chance I'd be risking that I'm really willing to take? Or will I just sit quiet, see how things play out and just have my finger on the red button just in case? But
Yeah.
yeah.
But just for the record, sorry, just for the record, Ross, NATO tried this with Georgia in 2008, 2009. They tried to put Georgia, another neighboring country of Russia, into NATO. The consequences were the same. Russia invade Georgia. First, Russia say, no, it's not going to happen. 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 They say it's going to happen. They start to move towards NATO. Russia went there, wrecked the country, took 20% of the territory, 20% of the population got annihilated or left. And then Georgia say, oops, that was a mistake. We cannot do this. Russia didn't give back the 20% of the territory. And today they are in very friendly terms. You would be surprised how friendly the terms are. We even show here that Georgia is buying things from Europe and sending to Russia. So NATO and the US, they tried this in 2008 with Georgia. Haven't you learned your lesson? Now you want to do it with Ukraine and you expect a different outcome? Einstein said, insanity is to do the same thing and expect a different outcome. They did the same thing with Finland. Look what happened to the internet connection of Finland. They got a submarine cables cut off. We made a video about that on the channel, that this was going to be the next point of attack for war. Finland is still having problems with their internet connection. The cables are being cut off. And I can guarantee you, whenever they fixed, it's going to be damaged again. You can be part of NATO, but you're not going to have internet.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I will.
Go ahead,
my
Andrew.
bad, Notorious.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Alchemist. If the borders, let's talk about country borders.
Yes.
Every country cannot be neutral around every other country, right? So just like it's unfair to say, oh, just because you're bordering my country, you cannot do this. No. Now, if you cross my line, then I'm going to take action into my own hands,
Okay.
right? And so Russia had no business invading Ukraine just because they wanted to join NATO. That's crazy.
Okay.
Why are you?
Okay.
Each country can do what they want to do.
Okay, so why can't Cuba make an alliance with China? What would happen if tomorrow China makes a military alliance with Cuba? What do you guys would do? What would your leaders do?
I don't know what Biden would do, but I believe that it probably would be ego driven, just as Roz mentioned, that, oh, I'm going to show some strength and you're going to do this. No, that's not our business, you know?
Okay, but look, we just talked about the missile crisis. USSR put missiles in Cuba. We are at the brink of nuclear war because of the US. The US didn't say, oh, Cuba is a sovereign country. USSR is a sovereign nation. It's none of our business that they have this military alliance. That was not the reaction of the US. The world was at the brink of a nuclear war.
Fair. Okay.
So if you didn't want for you, why are you doing to the other now? That's my question. Because if that was the standard, Ukraine is a sovereign country, Russia can say, we're not going to attack you guys. We're going to make an alliance with Cuba. We're going to make an alliance with Mexico. Let's put nuclear bases in Mexico. And I can guarantee you the US is not going to take it. And if you cannot take it, why are you doing to the other? I can guarantee you China cannot make Mexico is entering the BRICS nation. That's China put a nuclear base and their soldiers and weapons in Nicaragua and Mexico and see what the US will do. This is called the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is saying there's the East and there's the West. And the West keep their militaries on the West, and the East keep their military forces in the East. This is called the Monroe Agreement, the Monroe Doctrine. That's what was the US invoke upon the missile crisis. We need to not violate the Monroe Doctrine. So the US did not wanted Cuba to have Soviet missiles. Now they want to put missiles on, and want the other one to accept. That's the point that I find like it's a double standard. Does it make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Go ahead, Optimist.
Yeah. Booth, do you want to talk a little bit though? I mean, the other thing about this though that not a lot of people talk about, especially people who are on the side of Russia winning, basically, and like the anti, like not anti-American, but like America's losing, which I do agree. By the way, we should invest less into like going into other countries and just not deal with all that. Like I do agree with that, but there is another aspect to it where like Russia like buys a lot of natural gas from America as well. So it's not just about the oil, it's also the natural gas too, which is really, really important. So that's like the other side to it too. So it's not just like a one-sided thing where like America needs, like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So it's a little bit more complicated than that as well. So
yeah. Unfortunately, we're 10 minutes over the hour. I think we can call it a day, but it's a discussion that I want to continue having, and I'm glad to hear that I'm bringing news to you guys that you're not receiving in the US though. But that's what's happening in the world. So appreciate you guys. Thank you, BB, for joining us. I'm assuming you are watching this live on YouTube and then you decide to join the meeting. Always welcome. Appreciate you. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Raymond, Alchemist, Notorious, Cora. Appreciate you all, guys. Thank you. Oh, wait. Before we go, one question.
Thank you.
One question for those who are in America.